Santa Monica runs on more than sunshine and ocean air. It runs on good information. The Santa Monica Daily Press delivers the local news you need every day, free and independent. But free news isn't free to produce. That's why we need members like you. Join today at smdp.com/membership. The Santa Monica Daily Press, keeping our community informed. Hey everyone, it's Brian. This series sometimes contains adult language and may not be appropriate for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Also, a selection of Santa Monica Daily Press articles that cover the topics in this episode will be included in the show notes, so be sure to check those out. And a reminder to please follow the series and tell your friends. Your support of this podcast and local journalism is both needed and appreciated. Thanks. In 2024, 4.2 million people visited Santa Monica, many of them vacationing tourists. No doubt a good number of those also found their way to another well-known area attraction.
Walt Disney's Disneyland.
Disneyland in nearby Anaheim opened in 1955 and quickly became the most visited theme park in the United States. Its enduring popularity has a lot to do with the homey comfort of one of its most distinctive features, Main Street, USA, highlighted in a film called The Disneyland Story.
When you come in the main gate, past the railroad station, down the steps and across the band concert park, straight ahead lies the heartline of America, an old-fashioned Main Street.
Walt Disney had grown up in a small Missouri town and decided to recreate its turn-of-the-century Main Street at his theme park, a wide thoroughfare bordered by two-story buildings with shops on the first floor and fake windows on the second floor. But if those second floors had been in a real town, they would have been apartments and offices where people lived and worked in walkable proximity to the places where they also shopped and ate and worshipped and went to school. Building for walkability used to be a thing in America, and in Santa Monica too. But even way back in 1955, Walt Disney understood that he was offering his guests a stroll through a time capsule. People were already moving to suburbs, driving on highways, and leaving walkability behind. It's no accident that Disneyland's Main Street, USA ends at a fairy tale castle.
In this land, hopes and dreams are all that matter.
These days, housing development takes a lot of forms in Santa Monica, but the tidy apartment over a first-floor bakery is not really one of them. Instead, buildings are being designed to do lots of other things: maximize space and profits, care for the homeless, reimagine transit. In this episode, I'll examine 3 housing developments, none of which currently exist, but all of which have spurred debate and sometimes anger in Santa Monica. Unlike at Disneyland, these are not Cinderella stories. I'm Brian Peter Falk, and this is A Developing Story, a limited podcast series from Santa Monica Daily Press. We'll explore housing development one story at a time and try to figure out what those stories tell us about the future and ourselves. This is episode 5. 3 projects.
This podcast is supported in part by the Montana Avenue Merchants Association, inviting you to experience the best of Santa Monica. Montana Avenue is home to more than 150 shops, cafes, and restaurants across 10 walkable blocks. From boutique fashion to fitness studios to coffee bars and gourmet dining, it's where locals and visitors come to shop, dine, and unwind. Plan your visit today at montanaave.com.
Southern Californians love what real estate people call retail centers, but everyone else calls strip malls. Long, often one-story buildings that hold nail salons and dry cleaners and dentists, and under-the-radar amazing Mexican restaurants, all of them surrounding a surface parking lot. In Santa Monica, one such strip mall is on the busy corner of Lincoln Boulevard and Ocean Park Boulevard. Its anchor store is called Gelson's. Here's Daily Press Editor-in-Chief Matt Hall.
Gelson's is a grocery store here in the Los Angeles area, right? And we have one here in Santa Monica. And so It's got what you would imagine to be a grocery store layout, right? There's a big apron of parking in front. You get to the grocery store. There's stores around it. Very much a foundation for the local community. It's where people bought their groceries. It's where they got lunch on a Sunday. It's where their optometrist was.
But in 2022, a developer announced that the Gelson's strip mall, its official name is actually Lincoln Center, was being demolished. The Gelson's, a sushi place, a pharmacy, a dry cleaner, a nail salon, all gone. The entire property, more than 4.5 acres, would become a big housing development. 12 5-story structures holding 521 apartments. These days, Santa Monicans have come to expect news like this, but in 2022, it was all brand new.
At this point in the sort of development history timeline, no one imagined that where they live could be the subject of development. Development was a thing that happened in downtown areas or where things were already under construction or in vacant lots. There wasn't this mindset of the thing that I like could be lost to build housing. And so when this project emerged, when it was pitched, people were shocked. It was an extreme shock to the system that this existed and that they could lose something they loved and more housing would come in. And that in and of itself was groundbreaking in this debate. It really shook people up and changed the mindset that this could happen to me.
In episode 3, I explored density bonuses, state incentives that developers can access to increase the size of their market rate projects at the expense of offering a certain number of affordable units. For many Santa Monicans, the Gelson's project, as it would come to be known, was the first time they had ever heard the term density bonus.
It was really the canary in the coal mine as it came to these developers being able to use density bonuses and being able to radically increase height and density outside of any local control. The Gelson's project was one of, if not the first, to capitalize on these density bonuses that Sacramento has implemented. And they were very new and they were very scary. And a lot of folks decided that those were illegal and that this wasn't a legal project. And they made all kinds of sounds and complaints and screams about this must be corruption and who are they buying off and how dare this project be allowed to proceed. And at the end of the day, they were just wrong. They just didn't understand.
Like residents of most affluent communities, Santa Monicans were familiar with the levers of power. They often got their way, but not this time.
What was equally shocking to many of these folks was the realization that a community like Santa Monica, that does have wealth and has privilege and has a very high education level, could be, if not ignored, then certainly sidelined by lawmakers. People were not used to that concept, that when they shouted, nobody listened. And that was equally enraging and frustrating to them. And it really changed the tenor of the debate, where average folks who perhaps didn't know much else about politics were suddenly deeply concerned about what they viewed as a behemoth-like structure being dropped into their neighborhood and essentially creating a whole new reality for them in their day-to-day lives.
The neighbors were like, oh my God, we still can stop it. We can stop it. And I was like, unfortunately, we can't stop it.
Lana Negrete is a member of the Santa Monica City Council and the mayor.
But what we can do is meet with the developers and say, listen, you don't want to have everybody on your ass. I know you could build it no matter what, but how annoying is it to have everyone hate you in the community? Because they have other projects going on in the city. So maybe for the ground floor, we can get some buy-in from the neighbors, but you can only get that if you truly ask them and you truly want to give them what they need, because the success of the ground floor retail is meaningful to them, right? So I tried to orchestrate those small meetings in backyards to say, hey, can we meet with some folks about what they'd like to see at the bottom floor? That was what I did as a elected official when I heard about the project. If you're asking me how I feel about it, I mean, it's a bummer.
This is former City Council member Phil Brock.
Well, 525 units, of which 50 are affordable. That is not a good mix. I talked to the developer and said, cut 100 units, have more space. During the single public meeting that was held, a resident asked, where do the kids play in this building? Well, they can play behind the garages. And I'm looking at, and I think a lot of residents would look at that concentration as trying to build New York-style housing in Santa Monica. So I think if it was 300 units and there was some public park space as part of it, and bring Gelson's back.
Balboa Retail Partners, the property owner, did not respond to my request for an interview. They have also not held many community meetings or substantially changed their plans to address local concerns. Here's Matt Hall again.
The Gelsons was arguably the first example of this newfound swagger by developers, because historically they had to play nice. They had to ask people for things. They had to do community meetings and listen to folks. And there was this pantomime of, oh, you'd like some more open space here? Sure, we'll move a bush to the left and we'll change this color. And there was this motion of making everyone feel like they were involved. And now they didn't have to, because no one can stop them. And at the end of the day, these are economic projects for developers. They're here to make money and then move on to the next project. And if they don't have to listen to people and delay their projects and conduct extensive outreach, they're not going to. And they didn't, because they didn't have to, because the rules of the game had changed and it was no longer about partnerships and community building. It was about putting units where the government thinks they need to be as quickly and as efficiently as they can make happen.
For those bemoaning the impending loss of the Gelson's grocery store, the new project does include nearly 35,000 square feet of first-floor retail space, plenty big enough for a grocery store. Perhaps even a replacement Gelson's. At least that's the current rumor.
Sure, they say there's retail on the bottom, but I think we all have seen, maybe you disagree with me, that the majority of those retail on the bottom things sit vacant and change out. It's like a nail salon, a Pilates studio, a coffee place. It's like the same type of things that go in there, and they're not really serving the community. And so we're losing this space. It's like we keep talking about shoving people in boxes, but we haven't talked about what do they do when they go out of their box. And it's also taking away the pharmacy that many of the folks in Sunset Park, we have a lot of folks over 65, and that's their local pharmacy.
The Gelson's project also calls for 825 parking spots in a subterranean garage. So fears about new cars taking up all the street parking in the immediate neighborhood are probably unfounded. But those cars still have to get in and out of that garage.
First of all, it's on a busy corner, Lincoln and Ocean Park. And Ocean Park has had a road diet, is what they call it. So it used to be 2 lanes each side. It's now been road dieted in to put the bike lanes. And on that corner, when you make a right going east on Ocean Park, you could almost sideswipe those bike ballards if you're not paying attention. You used to have a separate lane where you would turn if you were going into that shopping center. So it will be very interesting from that perspective, from like safety, traffic, how they're going to mitigate all that. Everyone, of course, claims to have done all the studies and all the things to make sure that it works out well.
It is worth pointing out that the current surface parking lot at Gelson's has about 175 spaces, so there are plenty of daily car trips that already start and end there. And you're not going to find many people who are fans of big surface parking lots. This is former city council member and housing advocate Gleam Davis.
There is nothing uglier, more damaging to the environment, less conducive to community than a surface parking lot. So it's not as if the project is going to get rid of parking. It's just going to build a large residential project with ground floor retail, including presumably another Gelson's, and the parking will be moved underground. So getting rid of a surface parking lot to me is bravo. Yay, let's do it. If you ever walk in that neighborhood, and I live in Ocean Park and occasionally walk through there, it's like no man's land. It's just a dead corner. If you want to defend a surface parking lot with some of the ugliest buildings in Santa Monica, knock yourself out. I've learned you should only fight the battles you think you have a chance of winning.
I've mentioned public transit corridors before. For those who want a lot more housing in Santa Monica, the Gelson's project passes this test too. It will border Lincoln Boulevard, which is one of Santa Monica's busiest bus routes.
Right now we have timed, dedicated bus lanes on Lincoln, which work okay, but not great, particularly since right now they only exist from the freeway to the edge of the city. That's not going to save you a lot of time. But we're in conversations right now with the city of LA to do dedicated bus lanes all up and down Lincoln, which means you can get on a bus in Lincoln and be at the airport, be in El Segundo, Marina del Rey, Venice, wherever it is you want to go, and have a pretty smooth and relatively efficient, fast ride, which would be great. So it's even more imperative that we build housing on these transit corridors because the transit corridors will get better.
First floor retail, access to public transit, and parking are all part of the Gelson's project. But what about the 521 apartments themselves? For critics of the current state of large-scale housing development, the apartments matter. This is local architect and slow-growth advocate Mario Fonda Bonardi.
If you look at the so-called Gelson's project, 520-odd units, there they are. One of the things that all these projects have in common is that developers get to take away some laws that they don't like. For instance, we have a thing that you have to have a mix of units, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedrooms. First one they take away is, we don't want to build any 3-bedroom units. Why is that? Well, because I can make more money from 3 1-bedroom units than I can from 1 3-bedroom unit. Okay, so when you take away those 3-bedroom units, there goes the school district. The school district is now collapsing in terms of population. The only way they can stay afloat is by bringing in people outside the district. So you're basically discriminating against families.
I have not found any floor layouts for the Gelson's project, so can't confirm that it is avoiding multi-bedroom apartments. But it is a complaint I've heard about current apartment construction in general, that most new developments cater to young single people. Here's Phil Brock.
You're supposed to be expected to build some 2-bedroom and 3-bedrooms, which are hopefully not going to all be ex-college roommates. You want families. I don't want people just to move in and out because, my God, now I'm going to have a kid. So I got to move out of Santa Monica to have that kid. That may be ideal for the city council because then you have less residents rising up to yell and scream at them. But I don't think it's really good for the people who live in the city.
I've heard conflicting things about the future of the Gelson's project. One is that construction will break ground in 2027. I've also heard that the project, which is at a 50% density bonus, is only delayed because it's chasing a 100% bonus, which could add 200 apartments and likely more floors to its size. The density bonus matrix strikes again. I've also heard that the Gelson's project may never happen at all.
There hasn't been the money to build the project. That's why it's delayed. Interest rates are incredibly high. And the project itself, I know, has been put into stasis. It is not going forward right now. Doesn't mean it's over.
There are certainly hopes among some folks in the neighborhood that things like the recent Palisades fire that have radically increased construction costs and Trump tariffs on steel, there's lots of reasons that people hope this project would be derailed, but we've seen no sign of that. I mean, as recently as last year, it was at the Architectural Review Board. These projects can't be stopped, but they still do have to get their permits rubber stamped and have people sign things and dot I's and cross T's. So it's still moving through the process. There's no indication that it's not. And, a project that takes 12, 10, 15 years is actually not unusual from start to finish. Like that could just be how long it takes.
The next project we're going to explore doesn't have a memorable nickname like the Gelson's project. I've heard it called the 4th Street Former Parking Garage Project, which is sort of long, or 1318 4th Street, which is just its address, but a little boring. Its developers trying to call it Wave, like Ocean Wave, but not sure that one will stick. Regardless, a new residential building is being planned for the heart of Santa Monica's shopping zone. Here's Matt Hall.
Santa Monica's crown jewel, its hub, its thing that it's best known for is the pier and the Ferris wheel, and everyone has seen that on TV and shows and sunsets, and that's great. And people come there and they walk to the pier. But then where everybody goes after that is to our flagship retail zone, which we call the promenade, which is a pedestrian street several blocks long, and it's exactly what you envision a pedestrian promenade to be. There's some retail, there's some shopping, there's some restaurants, but it's very much what powers and drives Santa Monica. It's what all the locals think of when they think of shopping here and retail and what all the tourists visit. And when the promenade was built, there were several large public parking structures put in. Multi-story parking, very standardized, concrete levels, the whole shebang. And those for a long time were vital. Over time, the city has continued to build parking, and the parking structures that were originally built started to age. And it became apparent at a certain point that they would need some seismic retrofitting. So in California, we have earthquakes. So seismic retrofitting is the thing that everyone has to do around here as standards increase to make buildings stand up after earthquakes. And these parking structures were just old and aging. And there was a thought that maybe we don't need all of the parking structures. And so the idea was, what could they become? And initially, there was this thought that the parking structure could become more shopping and more retail. Perhaps it would be a movie theater, a nightclub venue. Perhaps it could be like a Planet Hollywood-esque entertainment venue. Like there were thoughts around what you would do with it. And there were lots of folks, I mean, me included, who just didn't think that would happen. It was just kind of a pie-in-the-sky idea to me. I thought it would be too difficult for the city to corral its cats and just get that done. And I was wrong.
In an era in which we are very used to government not always doing what it promises, the city of Santa Monica began tearing down parking structure number 3 at 1318 4th Street in February of 2022, but not to create more shopping or a movie theater or a Planet Hollywood.
The bulldozers rolled in one day, tore it down, flattened it out. And while this was all going on, the idea of what could it be also changed because the state was putting this pressure for housing, and movie theaters suddenly post-COVID were not a thing, right? No one's building a new movie theater in that entertainment zone. And suddenly the state says, well, what you really need to do is build housing. And what was really being pushed for was this low-income housing.
The current plans for this development call for a 6-story, 122-unit apartment building with first-floor retail space. In Episode 4, I explored affordable housing, including entire affordable buildings. This is one of those, but with a twist. 50 of the units are designated as permanent supportive housing for people currently experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness.
There's a general housing philosophy that exists of housing first. And what that means is lots of the folks who are on our streets, they're mentally ill or drug addicted, oftentimes both. And the philosophy says that in order to cure either or both of those ailments, you have to put them in housing first. And they need support to be able to maintain that level of sobriety and or mental health. They need counselors, they need medical professionals, they need psychiatric help. And so supportive housing is the end result of this housing first model, wherein it's more than just housing, it's less than being institutionalized, but it's in between those two things.
This juxtaposition of supportive housing for the homeless, only a block from Santa Monica's shopping promenade, has made this project inherently controversial.
This project tweaks a lot of people for a lot of reasons. This structure is now going to become an affordable housing project, which in and of itself would be controversial, right? Because the housing itself is not feeding into the local economy. The folks who are living there are not going to be shopping in the retail. They're not going to be eating in the restaurants. Not only is it low-income housing, it's low-income housing with a series of units devoted to formerly homeless individuals.
Supportive housing is very important because that's the only way you're going to transition people away from drugs, alcohol, the terrible things that have happened in their lives and continue to happen in their lives.
Phil Brock was on the city council when the 4th Street project came up for a vote.
I voted in the final vote to let the project go forward, but I'm not in favor of the project there. If you're trying to keep a downtown that is vibrant, that is a huge sales tax draw for the city, I would have preferred that we sell the land, take that funding, and find another place to put more affordable and supportive housing. I don't think it's a great use of the land. I don't think it helps the merchants downtown in Santa Monica whatsoever.
If housing development is Santa Monica's most contentious issue, homelessness is a close second. So I want to take a moment to talk about it. The state of California has roughly half of all homeless people in America. In 2024, Santa Monica's homelessness survey counted 812 unhoused people. That's one homeless person for every 113 Santa Monica residents, give or take, which is roughly 4 times the national average. Santa Monica is often called the People's Republic of Santa Monica because it leans so heavily to the political left. And you will not find many people here who are unsympathetic to the unhoused in the abstract. But homelessness and its corollaries of crime, squalor, and expense have driven a wedge through the city. There are plenty of Santa Monicans who believe that offering homeless people services only encourages them to come here. Services like supportive housing built a block from the promenade.
The city has failed to deal with a very difficult problem, which is homelessness. That doesn't seem to be solved. That doesn't seem to get better. Always getting more and more outrageous.
This is Mario Fonda Bernardi.
If I have a really great affordable housing program and I have a really great homeless program, then more homeless people will come. Why wouldn't they come? Because this is a place of great service and there's wealthy people that I can bum money off of. And we have housed our fair share of the homeless. We have good programs for them. We have buildings for them. We have escape routes so they can move up from being homeless to being supportive housing and then eventually get their own housing. If you address the problem, you still have to say, okay, this is the range of numbers that we can handle. We cannot afford to solve all of the county's homeless problems. That's not our job.
Homelessness and housing in California are intertwined issues, which of course makes sense. Homeless people may also have other problems, but what defines homelessness is not having a home. It's in the title. This is former city council member Glenn Davis.
You can edit this out of the podcast if I say it right, but I met someone one time for lunch who told me, oh, this is so horrible. Walking over here for lunch, I saw a man masturbating in the bushes. And I said, where do you masturbate? And he looked at me and said, what? And I said, he's masturbating in the bushes because he doesn't have a house. I guarantee you in the time we're sitting here, there will be many people in Santa Monica masturbating. There will be many people in Santa Monica using drugs. There will be many people in Santa Monica drinking far too much liquor. But you don't care because they're doing it in their home. If we get these people homes, the behavior, the uncivil behavior that you're seeing can be addressed. We can give them services. And more importantly, you won't have to see it.
Whether or not Santa Monica is attracting unhoused people, they are here. And if the choice is between those folks laying on the sidewalks near the promenade or laying in a bed in their own apartment near the promenade, I'm guessing most shoppers would take the latter.
People came to me and said, why do you want to house homeless people in downtown Santa Monica? And I said, they already live in downtown Santa Monica. They're just living without a home. And I think that's what you really need to think about. It's so many people say, and you can agree or disagree, that one of the impediments to revitalizing downtown is the number of people experiencing homelessness on the streets. And if you don't build housing for those people to live in, they're not going to disappear. They're not moving to Palmdale. They're not going to Chino Hills. They're going to stay on our streets. And so if we can take some of this, what we consider antisocial behavior, and just get people housing where they can move into a home, then all of a sudden that sense of civil disorder goes away. And I think that's really the key to revitalizing all of our economic areas. I mean, downtown is certainly the one we're all focused on, but whether it's Ocean Park Boulevard, Pico Boulevard, Montana Avenue, it really is about creating an environment where people feel safe and people don't feel like they're being exposed to disorder.
At the moment, the lot on 4th Street that once held parking structure number 3 is home to some temporary pickleball courts. According to the housing developer's website, the project is, quote, currently in pre-development and waiting for financial commitments, unquote. In other words, it's probably years from being built. Here's Matt Hall.
For a lot of folks who dislike it, it's the classic example of the homeless industrial complex generating jobs and stealing resources and destroying not just a community, but the ability of a community to be a place where something can actually happen, because they say this kind of housing is a detriment to the vitally needed retail that it's attached to. But the folks who like it are on the polar opposite. They say, this is exactly what you want. You want a community where everyone feels welcome and everyone should be able to be anywhere. And that if you put folks in other places, essentially that's just back to redlining and ghettos, right? So everyone has something about this project to argue about.
This podcast is brought to you in part by St. John's Women's Health and Wellness Institute in Santa Monica. Experience care designed by women, for women, in a 7,000 square foot women-centric facility that blends medical expertise with education and holistic support. Whether you need well women exams, maternity care, mental health resources, or educational workshops, Providence St. John's has you covered, with your own patient navigator and commitment to empowering you through every stage of life. Call 833-34-HER and make your health a priority.
When you advertise in the Santa Monica Daily Press, you're doing two things at once: supporting local journalism and putting your business in front of the most engaged audience in town. Our readers live, work, and spend here. Print, web, and newsletters, we are trusted by thousands every single day. That means your ad drives calls, clicks, and customers while showing your commitment to the community. Support local news, grow your business. Advertise with the Santa Monica Daily Press. The third project in this episode is older than the first two and, unlike those, has no chance of ever being built. But that actually makes it pretty interesting.
What's interesting about this piece of land is it's sort of the alpha and the omega of these development debates, because it was both the end of a particular reality and a particular time in development, but it marked the beginning of the current era.
What Matt is talking about is a large housing development that was once planned for a former ballpoint pen factory on the east side of Santa Monica. If you remember episode 4, I talked about a multi-use area that was home to an LA Metro train stop. That area is called Bergamot Station. The ballpoint pen factory was across the street. The development was first conceived in 2010. At that time, the new metro station was on its way, and the city hoped to use that momentum to revitalize the surrounding neighborhood. By 2014, the city had approved a plan for the 5-acre pen factory site, which included 500 apartments, office space, park space, and 2 new roads to ease the additional traffic. It was going to be called Bergamot Transit Village. Gleam Davis was on the city council at that time.
Was it a perfect project? No. But it had a lot of open space. They were planning an outdoor theater place. It was going to have a farmer's market. It had some office space, which at the time people thought we needed. It had residential. And not only that, it was going to be the catalyst for revitalization of that whole neighborhood. We talked about the Nebraska Spine, which was going to revitalize Nebraska Avenue, and it was going to become a commercial corridor instead of a bunch of old ramshackle buildings.
But Bergamot Transit Village faced headwinds from the start. First, the planning for this project occurred in the wake of America's Great Recession, and Santa Monica was already being inundated with long-delayed construction.
We went through this period of time where the economy didn't do so good and all development ceased temporarily. And as the economy got better, every project that had been in the pipeline suddenly went into construction. And so for locals in Santa Monica, it felt like they were suddenly rushed with projects. All of a sudden, every corner was buildings. And the community didn't really understand that this was the same amount of development that you probably always should have had. It had just been compressed because it had been depressed for a while. It felt like overdevelopment, and it felt like the city was being taken over by construction. This project became the sort of poster child for that. It was the one project that people could rally around in enough time that they could actually stop.
I remember walking my kids to their grade school and seeing well-meaning parents armed with clipboards asking people to sign petitions to stop Bergamot Transit Village. One of their main gripes was a familiar one: traffic. Here's Phil Brock.
The crazy thing was the studies for that project showed that Sunset and Bundy would be jammed. Now, this wasn't paid for by NIMBYs. It was independent studies that showed overwhelming traffic, 23rd and 21st from Venice, which are already crazy overburdened. But it was just going to stall traffic.
By the city's own estimates, Bergamot Transit Village was likely to generate 7,000 additional car trips a day. Even bearing in mind that running an errand and returning home counts as 2 trips, that was a big number. Those who were against it accused the city of trying to hide such a big project and all those car trips in the midst of the warehouses and office parks of the Bergamot neighborhood. This is Mario Fonda Bernardi.
One of the traditional planning devices is put your smokestack industries downwind of your city. So let's put our smokestack industries down there in that corner of the city in the Bergamot area. There'll be total gridlock, 7,000 cars coming into that area, but it'll be downwind of us. We have a lot of jobs in Santa Monica, so we're very desirable. You look in the morning, I'm sure you've seen it, the 10 freeway is cars going, not downtown, it's cars coming this way, right? So if you think of moving this node and you drop it there and it becomes kind of a plug in the city's circulation system.
Those petitions in front of the school threatened a public referendum on the future of the development, and they were getting plenty of signatures to do it.
The fear of what we call a referendum was quite large. California's version of democracy allows direct democracy by residents, which isn't the same everywhere. You, some random person, if you get enough signatures, you can put something on the ballot. So anyone can undo any decision the government has made if you can get people to vote your way. And so this project galvanized almost the entire community against it. There were so many people and strange bedfellows, folks who wouldn't normally be on the same side of the political debate, who felt that this project was a step too far. It was too big, it was too dense, it was too gaudy, it wasn't the right location. It didn't fit anyone's idea of what it should be, except for the majority of the city council. And so there was this threat of a referendum, and people said, we will implement direct democracy and undo this decision and take this away from you.
The 7-member city council had previously voted to approve Bergamot Transit Village by the narrowest margin, 4 votes to 3. If they wanted to avoid a referendum, one of those 4 would need to change their yes vote to no. The person who did just that was Gleam Davis.
I voted for it. I thought it made sense back then. And I changed my vote, so it got approved on a 4-3 vote. They went out and got signatures to put an initiative on the ballot, and then when under our law, it had to come back to council, and I changed my vote against the project so that there wouldn't be an initiative on the ballot. And my stated reason for doing so, and it was an honest reason, was I thought having it on the ballot would be incredibly polarizing for the community. I thought, okay, having a vote, having an election that's going to center around this project is just going to crack us into a number of pieces, and I just don't want to see that for my community. I was wrong. The community got polarized anyway. So I changed my vote for nothing.
The city council decided that they would actually revoke the project on their own and say, if we do this, if this project goes away, so will the community angst over development. They hoped it was going to smooth over all of those feelings. What they didn't realize was the schism had already occurred, and nobody maybe understood how deep it was or how permanent it was. They certainly didn't understand that it was too late to join what had since been split.
Bergamot Transit Village had been devised to revitalize a neighborhood. It was intentionally built next to a metro train stop to encourage mass transit, and the developer, a multinational company called Hines, had promised Santa Monica around $16 million for education, parks, and to improve traffic flow. None of it mattered. In the end, Hines built a different but somewhat similar development. It's actually on the same street, but a mile to the east and just outside the border of Santa Monica. By the way, there's a Gelson's supermarket on the first floor. The old pen factory was eventually turned into an office complex. It's called, appropriately enough, the Pen Factory. It boasts more than 200,000 square feet of space and a subterranean garage for 700 cars. Of course, building office space in a remote work post-COVID world is not exactly a growth business.
You may remember there was an old commercial, I think the EPA or somebody did it, of a Native American on a dirty river with a single tear driving down his eye. And I sort of feel like that every time I drive by that intersection. You know, and people told me, well, it won't be that bad because in 5 or 10 years, it'll get redeveloped and it'll be a better project. Well, that has not come to pass. So many people were wrong about many things in connection with that project, including myself. Some people were opposed to it because it didn't have enough housing, or some people were opposed to it because it had too much housing. And it was such a big project that someone could find something to hate. That's what it really came down to. It was such a big project, you could find something to hate.
But the loose coalition of people and organizations that successfully killed Bergamot Transit Village didn't last.
That fear of referendum was strong, and the folks who had mounted it were emboldened, right? They got the project to be undone. And it looked like they had the momentum. They went on to write some ballot measures that would have changed the laws. They ran some candidates, and they lost every time. They just did not win anything after that. And it was pretty clear that the status quo was actually fully on the side of housing. The pro-housing contingent definitely retained the reins of power in Santa Monica.
And that brings us back to today. Think about everything else you've heard in this series. The latest housing element that mandates more than 9,000 new units for Santa Monica. The updated density bonuses that allow developers to double the size of their projects. The state laws that prioritize building housing next to bus and train lines, although we still rely on our cars. Those 7,000 daily car trips that the project may have added might be coming anyway.
I think it was oversized. You know, it was too big. We're getting too big anyway. But the too big is now distributed. It's happening in your neighborhood. It's happening in my neighborhood. It's happening all over the place. So in some ways, the killer traffic impacts are not going to be concentrated, but eventually they will be because all those people need to get out of the city at some point.
If Bergamot Transit Village were being proposed today, it's unlikely anybody in Santa Monica would be able to stop it. For local housing advocates like Tara Borowskis, that's cold comfort.
Yeah, it's a real missed opportunity. I think it's that poster child for just land use, right? Having a one-story office park versus this big, beautiful mixed-use village that would have brought more walkability and more families to the neighborhood. We need to do better than that, and we need to think about our 8 square miles and how do we use those resources more effectively.
What do people really want? Walkability? Unhoused people off the streets, a familiar grocery store. There are all sorts of possible futures. Which one will we choose? And how will we get there?
I'm 68 years old, about to turn 69. I'm not the person who's going to turn this city around, but the people who are coming here in their 20s and 30s and raising their kids, that's the future of this city.
What is the problem we are trying to solve? Okay, if there's too many people and not enough houses for people to go inside of, we need to stop and really take a true unbiased, unpolitical head count and establish who really has that problem and where is it.
I'm not against all housing. I think you'd have to be willing to adapt and play with your city and make it better.
We are trapped by imagination. We really can't imagine how bad it could be if we don't change our ways, if we don't look at things differently.
That's in the next and final episode of A Developing Story. But before you click on that next episode, please give the series a rating. 5 stars is, of course, appreciated. You can also leave a review. The more ratings and reviews, the more people will listen. Thanks.
A Developing Story is a limited podcast series from Santa Monica Daily Press. The series was created, written, and hosted by Brian Peter Falk. The series was produced by Brian, Matthew Hall, and Ross Furukawa. It was edited and mixed by Alan Kraut. Original music by Brian and Alan. If you have a question or comment, you can email the series at podcast@smdp.com.